What kind of world forces a woman to stand on a wooden stage, soaked in sleet, while strangers debate whether she is worth even a single dollar? The question hung in the frozen Montana wind the night Evelyn Grace Whitford was pushed into the auction house. Her boots torn open at the seams, her breath turning to ice each time she exhaled. It was 1878, and winter had swallowed the territory whole. Yet nothing in that merciless cold was as bitter as the humiliation waiting for her inside. The door slammed behind her, shutting out the storm but trapping her in another. A dozen women stood along the wall, each with a number pinned to her chest, each trying to look small enough to be ignored or strong enough to survive. Evelyn didn't know which instinct she should follow. The floorboards creaked under her weight as she stepped forward, dripping from the storm, the smell of mud, fear, and wet wool heavy in the room. The auctioneer didn't bother hiding his irritation. Another half-frozen widow was the last thing he wanted to deal with tonight. He lifted her chin with 2 fingers, examined her like a farmer checking a mule's teeth, and announced to the crowd that she was 29, barren, and already broken in. The laughter that followed cracked through her like rifle fire. Evelyn forced herself to stare at the wall beyond them, steady and cold, even as humiliation pressed like a boot on her throat. She had lost her husband to fever 2 winters ago, but the world acted as though she had lost her worth long before that. When her turn arrived, she stepped onto the platform, the lantern light catching the tear in her coat sleeve and the tremor in her hands. The auctioneer cleared his throat, calling for bids. A man with tobacco-stained fingers offered $1 just for the boots, earning another round of crude laughter. Someone else shouted $2, but added he'd need proof she could still work. $3 came from the back, spoken with the laziness of a man bidding on a sack of grain rather than a human life. Then silence. The kind that closes in on your ribs. The kind that confirms every cruel word spoken about you. Evelyn kept her jaw tight, refusing to let the tears fall, even as the crowd began shifting away, losing interest. She felt herself disappearing. Then a voice, low, steady, and sharp as a winter blade, cut through the room. $1? The laughter halted. Heads turned. The man who stepped forward seemed carved from stone itself. Broad shoulders beneath a dark wool coat, gloves worn from long seasons of labor, jaw set like he'd forgotten how to soften it. Jackson Hale, owner of one of the largest ranches in the region. A man whose silence was more feared than most men's anger. "Hale," someone whispered. "Are you mad? She's not worth the candlelight to look at." $1, he repeated, not raising his voice, not explaining, simply placing the coin on the table as though the matter were settled. The auctioneer blinked, confused. "Sir, the last bid was $3. "1, Jackson said again, "because this isn't a purchase." The room shifted. "Then what is it?" Someone jeered. "A mercy?" A dangerous quiet filled the space. The kind men respect without understanding. "A choice," Jackson answered. "For her, not for you." Evelyn looked up for the first time, meeting eyes the color of storm clouds over iron. There was no pity there, no desire, no ownership. Only something she hadn't seen in years, recognition. As though he saw the exhaustion lodged in her bones and the fire still burning beneath it. Jackson turned to her. "You don't belong here. Come with me if you want work, room, and your dignity left untouched. I won't ask for anything you don't give freely." The crowd exploded with outrage. "You can't just walk out with her. She's a barren widow. Hale, you fool, she'll bleed you dry." Jackson didn't listen. He simply extended his hand, palm open, steady, waiting. The offer wasn't romantic. It wasn't sentimental. It was something far more dangerous, an invitation to rewrite her fate. Evelyn hesitated only a heartbeat, Not because she doubted him, but because accepting meant stepping into a life she could no longer predict. A life where she owed nothing to the men laughing in this room. She slipped her hand into his. Warm, solid, final. The auctioneer slammed his ledger shut, unable to argue with a man who could level the room with silence alone. Jackson led her out into the storm, his coat thrown over her shoulders. The cold hit like a wall, but Evelyn felt something else beneath it. Movement, a shift, the wheel of her life turning. She had walked into this place, a woman stripped bare. She walked out beside a stranger who did not want to own her, but who might, if she dared trust him, change everything. And in that frozen night, as wind clawed across the prairie, Evelyn realized the most dangerous choices were sometimes the ones that offered freedom. The storm had followed them across the prairie, scraping the horizon like a dull blade. But inside Jackson Hale's carriage, the cold slowly loosened its grip. Evelyn sat wrapped in his coat, the fabric heavy with the scent of smoke, leather, and long days under the Montana sun. She tried to steady her breath, still half expecting the door to fly open and the auctioneer to drag her back. Instead, Jackson drove in silence, his gaze fixed ahead, his jaw tight with a kind of discipline that came from years of swallowing words instead of speaking them. When the ranch finally appeared, an enormous sprawl of barns, corrals, and a grand, weather-beaten house with 14 rooms. Evelyn wondered if she had stepped onto someone else's life. It was bigger than anything she had imagined. Bigger than anything she had believed she deserved. Jackson stopped the horses and turned toward her, the wind shaking the lantern light between them. "Before you step inside," he said, voice even, "you need to know what this place really is, not the stories." Evelyn nodded, though her pulse skittered. "This ranch runs because everyone here pulls their weight. That includes me. I don't drink, I don't raise my voice, I don't hit. And I don't expect anything from you except honesty and the work you agree to." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "You're not property. You're not here to serve me. You're here because you chose to walk out of that building with me. Understand?" She felt something inside her shift. A knot loosening, a weight she didn't know she'd been carrying easing off her shoulders. "I understand," she said softly. The front door opened before they reached it. Martha Collins, the stout, fiery-haired cook, eyed Evelyn from head to toe, taking in the soaked dress, the chapped hands, the trembling exhaustion. "Lord above," Martha muttered. "You brought home a ghost." Jackson ignored the comment. "She's the new housekeeper," he said. "Show her where to sleep." Evelyn swallowed. "Mr. Hale, Jackson," he corrected. "Call me Jackson." Martha's brows shot up so high they nearly vanished under her hairline. Evelyn simply nodded, her voice too thin to use. Jackson stepped back outside, leaving Martha grumbling as she led Evelyn through the dim hallways that smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Her assigned room was small but clean, with a bed pushed against the wall and a single window overlooking the distant barn lights. Evelyn set Jackson's coat on the chair and allowed herself a breath she had been holding since the auction. She wasn't safe. Not fully. But she wasn't trapped either. For the first time in years, she stood somewhere in between. Dawn came early. Too early. Evelyn woke to chaos. Clattering pans, shouting, the distant bellow of cattle. When she entered the kitchen, Martha looked 2 seconds away from throwing a skillet at someone's head. "Finally awake," Martha snapped. "Good. I need hands, and everyone else around here is either lazy, incompetent, or breathing just to annoy me." Evelyn froze only a moment before instinct took over. She rolled up her sleeves, surveyed the disaster. Dirty pots stacked to the ceiling, a pantry in disarray, breakfast behind schedule, and began working with the quiet precision she had learned in harder years. By mid-morning, the kitchen ran like a tamed animal. Martha stared at her as if she'd just witnessed a resurrection. "Well," Martha muttered, crossing her arms, "maybe you're not a ghost after all." Word traveled fast. By the end of the day, ranch hands peeked into the kitchen to catch sight of the woman who had turned the house upside down in less than 2 hours. Some were curious. Some were suspicious. Some whispered that Jackson must be out of his mind. Evelyn ignored all of them. Work was easier than thinking, easier than remembering. But the ranch was bigger than just the kitchen. In the following days, she cataloged the pantry, arranged shifts, reassigned duties, scrubbed grime out of corners no one bothered to look at, and corrected supply records that had clearly been ignored for months. Each task built her confidence, gave her something steady to hold on to. And yet, the house was not the only place haunted by shadows. Late one night, Evelyn discovered Jackson in the barn, sitting on a bale of hay, hands clasped together, shoulders slumped like the weight of the entire ranch rested on them. A lantern flickered beside him, casting long bars of light across his face. He hadn't heard her approach. Or maybe he had and didn't care. His voice was low, barely audible. "You shouldn't be working this late." She stepped closer. "Neither should you." He huffed a breath, something like a laugh, but hollow. Couldn't sleep. Evelyn didn't press. Silence could be a shelter for people like him, for people like her. Then she noticed the deep scar running across his knuckles, the old burn near his wrist, the way he kept flexing his hand like it hurt. A soldier's injuries, a survivor's tale. "Does it pain you?" she asked quietly. Jackson didn't look at her. "Only when I remember." His shoulders stiffened, as if he had revealed too much. "War leaves marks," he added, "even the ones no one sees." She knew that truth too well. "So does marriage," she whispered before she realized the words had escaped. Jackson turned his head, really looking at her now. Not with pity, with understanding, with the recognition of someone who knew what it meant to survive someone else's cruelty. "If you're here to escape a man," he said slowly, "you won't find his shadow in this house." Her breath trembled, but she stood tall. "And what about yours?" His expression didn't change, but something softened. "Mine stay where they belong." Over the next weeks, the rhythm of the ranch changed. Evelyn rose before dawn, oversaw breakfast, coordinated workers, handled injuries, soothed tempers, and earned the respect of men who had dismissed her as a burden on day one. Even the ranch hands stopped whispering when she passed. All except one, Caleb Turner, the youngest, who tried to prove himself by working faster than his body could handle. The accident happened without warning. A panicked horse, a loose plank, a sickening thud. Evelyn heard the shouting from across the yard and ran. Caleb lay on the dirt, his leg twisted at an angle no leg should ever bend. The men hovered helplessly, unsure whether to move him. Evelyn pushed through, dropping to her knees. "Bring me hot water, clean cloth, and a lantern," she commanded, her voice steady in the chaos. "Now." Jackson arrived moments later, but he didn't interfere. He watched as Evelyn examined the leg, set the bone with calm precision, whispered instructions with the authority of someone who had held life in her hands before. When it was done and Caleb had been carried inside, Jackson approached her. For the first time, his voice carried something close to awe. "Evelyn, just her name. But it held weight. Respect. Maybe something else buried under it. She met his gaze, breathless from effort. He'll live. Jackson nodded slowly. Because of you. Those words lingered in the air long after he walked away. That night, when she finally let herself collapse into bed, Evelyn realized something unsettling. She no longer felt like a guest or a burden or a ghost haunting the halls. She felt necessary. She felt alive. And somewhere in the dark corners of the Hale Ranch, something old and wounded between them was beginning to stir. Something that neither of them yet dared to name. The first signs were subtle, fatigue deeper than the long days could explain, a hollow rolling in her stomach each dawn, a strange tightness in her chest whenever she smelled Martha's stew simmering on the stove. Evelyn ignored them at first, brushing off the nausea as a reaction to stress and the relentless pace of ranch life. But the morning she nearly fainted while carrying linens up the stairs, Martha caught her by the elbow with surprising gentleness and stared at her with sharp, knowing eyes. Sit, Martha ordered, dragging a chair behind her. You're pale as moonlight and trembling like you've got fever. Evelyn tried to muster a reassuring smile. I'm only tired. Tired doesn't make a woman gag when she smells onions, Martha murmured. And tired doesn't make a widow miss her courses 3 months in a row. The words struck Evelyn like a blow. She froze, unable to breathe. For a moment, the world narrowed into a single, impossible idea. One she had buried deep, one she had taught herself never to hope for. No, she whispered. It's not possible. They told me. She didn't finish. Martha's expression softened in a way Evelyn rarely saw. Doctors are men, honey. Men are wrong plenty. The room felt too small, too warm, too bright. Evelyn stood, gripping the edge of the table as if the wood could anchor her to the earth. I need a doctor, she said quietly. Martha nodded. I already sent for Whitmore. Dr. Henry Whitmore arrived that afternoon, his horse panting from the hurried ride. He was a steady man with weathered hands, and he asked the sort of questions a man asks when he's seen too many women break under the weight of fear and hope pressed together. When he placed his hand gently over her stomach and listened, his brows slowly lifted. Mrs. Whitford, he said, voice thick with disbelief. You're about 14 weeks along. The room blurred. Evelyn swayed, and Martha rushed to steady her. 14 weeks. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Her heart had clenched too tightly to allow anything out. When the words finally reached her, they reached like sunlight against frost. I'm with child? Dr. Whitmore nodded. A strong one, too. Your pulse tells me that. She covered her mouth, shaking. She had been told she was barren, told she was useless, told she was a dead end for any man hoping for a family. Yet here she stood, carrying life. Life created not out of obligation or desperation, but out of something tender and unspoken between her and Jackson Hale. The doctor left instructions and slipped out quietly, giving her space. As soon as the door closed, Evelyn sat, leaning both hands over her abdomen, the warmth of her palms meeting a truth that felt too sacred to speak aloud. A life inside her. It felt like a miracle that had arrived without permission, shattering everything she believed about herself. She waited until evening before walking toward the west pasture, where she knew Jackson would be checking fences as he always did. The wind tugged at her dress, and her boots sank into the soft earth as she crossed the field. Jackson stood alone at the ridge, shoulders squared against the setting sun, unaware that the world beneath his feet was about to tilt. Jackson, she called softly. He turned. moment he saw her face, the guarded tension in his expression cracked. "What's wrong?" Evelyn tried to speak, but the words tangled, so she stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver beginning to appear at his temples, the honesty etched into every line of his face. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. His eyes narrowed. Worry? Fear? The instincts of a man who had already lost too much. She took his hand and placed it gently over her abdomen. Jackson's breath stopped. Completely. His jaw fell slightly open, and for a heartbeat, he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. "Evelyn." It wasn't a question. It was a prayer. 14 weeks, she murmured, tears finally rising. "The doctor says the baby is strong." Jackson staggered a step back as though struck. His hands lifted to his hair, his eyes full of disbelief and something fragile and raw. "They told me you couldn't. They told me the same." For the first time since she'd known him, Jackson's eyes filled with tears. Not a few. Not hidden. He pressed a hand over his mouth, and a soft, broken sound escaped him. A sound of joy so fierce it bordered on pain. When he stepped forward, he didn't kiss her. He didn't pull her close. He simply wrapped his arms around her and held on like she was the last true thing in his life. The field fell silent around them. The world seemed to pause. Something new and enormous had begun, but miracles often draw shadows. Within a week, gossip rolled across town like wildfire. Men scoffed that Jackson Hale had been tricked. Women whispered that a widow like Evelyn couldn't have conceived so quickly unless she'd arrived at the ranch already with child. And no voice cut sharper than Victoria Aldridge, whose hate for Evelyn was born from envy, spite, and a simmering obsession with Jackson Hale she had never admitted aloud. She appeared at the ranch uninvited one afternoon, sweeping up the porch steps like a storm in lace. "I came to offer my condolences," she announced loudly as Evelyn opened the door. Evelyn held herself steady. "For what?" "Your child's reputation," Victoria said sweetly, her eyes glittering. "It must be hard, carrying a baby when the whole town knows it can't possibly be Jackson's." The words were poison, crafted to wound. Evelyn kept her voice even. "Leave." Victoria smirked. "Truth hurts?" A heavy bootstep sounded behind Evelyn. Jackson. His presence filled the doorway like thunder. "You step foot on this porch again," he said, voice deadly calm, "and you won't leave standing." Victoria paled. She had wanted him angry. She hadn't expected him dangerous. She left without another word. But poison leaves residue. Evelyn felt it long after Victoria's carriage rolled away. That night, Jackson sat beside her by the fire, their hands entwined over the gentle curve of her stomach. "They can talk," he said. "Let them choke on it." "It hurts anyway," she whispered. He leaned his forehead against hers. "Then we'll face it together." She nodded. The house was quiet, except for the crackle of flames. Outside, winter winds crawled along the windows. But inside, something stronger than the storm pressed its roots deeper into their lives. Love. The kind that grows in fire. The kind that defies judgment. The kind that fate itself seems determined to test. And as Evelyn rested her head on Jackson's shoulder, she understood something she had never dared to believe. Miracles never arrive alone. They come with challenges, with darkness, with choices that carve the future. And theirs had only just begun. Trouble arrived the way storms often did in Montana. Without warning, without mercy, and carrying the scent of something old and unfinished. It began on a late autumn morning when the ranch hands discovered 3 of Jackson's best mares missing from the north pasture. At first, they blamed rustlers. But when the second theft came, tools from the barn, feed barrels slashed open, fences cut clean through, Jackson's expression hardened into something Evelyn had never seen before. Recognition. "This isn't random," he said, staring at the broken gate. "It's a message." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "From who?" Jackson didn't answer immediately. He just looked toward the distant ridge, jaw flexing. Cole Dalton. The name alone carried enough venom to sour the air. Dalton had once been a rancher with land bordering Jackson's. But greed had hollowed him, and the drought 2 years ago destroyed what little he had left. When Jackson refused to buy his land at the outrageous price Dalton demanded, the man lost everything and blamed Jackson for the fall. Dalton had vanished soon after, leaving nothing but rumors of drunken rage and a vow. One day, Hale will pay for what he took. Now the promise had come home. Jackson ordered extra watches at night, doubled the patrol around the barns, and kept a rifle propped by the door, even at breakfast. But the danger didn't stay in the shadows for long. It stepped through the front gates in broad daylight. Evelyn saw him first, sitting on a horse like he owned the land he trespassed on, hat pulled low, a smirk carved into his face. Cole Dalton, gaunt, sharp-eyed, carrying the stale bravado of a man desperate enough to be unpredictable. Jackson walked out to meet him with the slow, steady gait of someone refusing to show fear. Evelyn stayed on the porch, one hand resting instinctively over her growing belly. "Hale," Dalton drawled, "heard you've been expanding. New wife, new baby on the way. Congratulations." Jackson didn't respond. Dalton clicked his tongue. "Shame, though. Territory's dangerous. Fences break, animals go missing, accidents happen." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jackson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever you want, you won't get it here." Dalton grinned. "Oh, I already got something. Been getting it for months." For a moment, Evelyn felt cold wash through her. Something about his tone, gleeful, knowing, didn't fit. Jackson frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Ask your accountant." Dalton tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode off without looking back. Evelyn went still. So did Jackson. The truth struck both of them at the same time. Howard Mills, the ranch accountant of 7 years. Quiet, polite, always balancing the books with a calm, methodical hand. Too calm, Evelyn now realized. Too unquestioned. Jackson stormed into the office, Evelyn beside him. They tore through the ledgers, page by page, number by number. It didn't take long. Missing funds, altered entries, fake invoices, hidden withdrawals. A slow bleed of money so carefully disguised that no one lacking Evelyn's sharp eye and Jackson's instinct for betrayal would have noticed. Evelyn traced the ink with trembling fingers. "He's been stealing from us for almost a year." Jackson's voice was low. "Since before the baby?" No, that meant Dalton's attack wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, coordinated. A noose tightening around them while they slept in the same house, ate at the same table, trusted the same man. As if summoned by guilt, Howard entered moments later carrying a ledger. His face blanched when he saw the document spread across Jackson's desk. "Mr. Hale, Jackson's fist slammed onto the table so hard, the ink bottle jumped. "Don't speak." Howard swallowed, eyes darting to Evelyn as though seeking mercy. "Please. Dalton forced me. He said he'd kill me if—" "You stole from a pregnant woman," Jackson snapped, voice shaking with controlled fury. "You stole from her children." Howard broke then, sobbing. babbling excuses about debts and threats and mistakes he couldn't undo. Evelyn didn't look away. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why strike at us now?" Howard wiped his face. "Dalton wants your ranch. All of it. He said if I drained enough money, you'd be too weak to fight when he came to take it." Jackson stepped around the desk and seized Howard by the collar. "And when was that supposed to happen?" Howard's lips trembled. "Tonight." Time fractured. Hours blurred. Jackson locked Howard in the pantry under armed guard and ordered every ranch hand to arm themselves. The sun began to set, bleeding red across the plains like a warning. Evelyn moved through the house, gathering blankets, first aid supplies, anything she might need if the worst happened. Fear churned in her chest, but beneath it burned something harder. Rage. Rage for her children. Rage for the life she had clawed into existence from ash. Rage for the man who had carried her out of a nightmare with nothing but a single dollar and his word. When the attack finally came, it was swift and brutal. Dalton and 5 armed men rode through the dark, firing shots into the air, aiming to stampede the cattle and set the barn ablaze. The ranch erupted in chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the thunder of hooves. Jackson fought at the front line, his silhouette framed by flames growing along the barn roof. Evelyn stayed near the house, keeping the youngest hands sheltered, ready to treat wounds. But when she saw Dalton slip around the burning barn with a lantern in hand, heading straight for the house where she and her unborn child stood, she felt her pulse turn to steel. She grabbed a rifle and ran. She found him near the back porch, striking a match. "Put that down," she said. Dalton turned, surprised, and then delighted. "Well, well, the miracle woman." He tossed the match at her feet, letting it burn out on the dirt. "You think you can stop me?" Evelyn lifted the rifle, the barrel steady despite her shaking breath. "I know I can." Dalton laughed. "You won't shoot. Women like you never do." "Women like me survive." Dalton lunged. The gunshot shattered the night. Dalton fell, the lantern slipping from his hand, flames licking harmlessly at the dirt. When Jackson reached them moments later, he found Evelyn standing over the man who had threatened their family, her hands trembling but her eyes unbroken. In the aftermath, the sheriff arrived. Howard confessed everything, and Dalton was taken away, alive but beaten, not by bullets, but by the woman he had believed was too fragile to fight. The next morning, Jackson didn't speak for a long time. He just held Evelyn, his forehead pressed to hers. "You protected our family," he whispered. She breathed out, voice steady. "We protected it." That afternoon, in a gesture that stunned the entire territory, Jackson signed legal documents transferring 500 acres of land and half the breeding operation directly into her name. "You've earned every inch of this," he told her. "This is your home as much as mine. Maybe more." Evelyn felt tears rise, not from gratitude alone, but from the quiet, bone-deep realization that she had finally become something she never believed she could be again. Free. The danger had passed. The ranch still stood. But freedom, they would soon learn, always has a cost, and fate was not done testing them. The years that followed Dalton's downfall were carved in light. Golden summers rolling across the Montana fields. Newborn cries rising in warm, sunlit rooms. And evenings where the Hale home glowed with laughter, music, and the soft chaos of children growing into themselves. Evelyn often stood on the porch at dusk, her arms wrapped around whichever child toddled nearest, watching Jackson ride in from the far pastures like a dark silhouette against a burning sky. Life had not been kind to them, but it had surrendered moments of unexpected grace, and they took each one as if it were a gift borrowed from heaven. Their children grew in the image of the land, strong, honest, stubborn, full of possibility. Jonathan, steady and thoughtful, learned the ranch routes before he could read. Eleanor, fiercely intelligent, asked questions that startled adults into silence. Samuel showed gentleness with injured animals that made Evelyn's heart ache with pride. Theodore dreamed of machines and inventions. Rosalie stole away with notebooks full of scribbled stories. Liam chased storms instead of hiding from them. And little Amelia toddled behind her father with absolute devotion. 7 children. 7 miracles she had never expected to hold. And Jackson? He softened in a way only fatherhood could carve a man. He played harmonica by the fireplace, carried sleepy toddlers across the yard, and kissed Evelyn in the kitchen when no one was looking. Their love, born from desperation, shaped by hardship, had grown into something rooted, powerful, and whole. Yet even the strongest roots cannot keep out certain storms. The first sign came on a winter morning when Jackson coughed blood into his hand. He wiped it quickly, but Evelyn saw. He told her it was nothing. A cold, overwork, dust from the cattle drive. But Evelyn knew the body too well, knew the tremor beneath his voice, the way he pressed a hand to his ribs when he thought no one was watching. Consumption. The same sickness that had taken her first husband, the same sickness that stole breath from the strongest men, the same sickness doctors whispered about with lowered eyes. She begged him to rest. He refused. The ranch needed him. The children needed him. Evelyn needed him. But the cough worsened, slowly at first, then with ruthless speed. She found him gasping near the barn one night, blood on his sleeve, his knees buckling. She helped him inside, her hand steady though her heart felt like it was cracking down the center. The doctor confirmed what they already knew. 6 months, he said quietly. Jackson held Evelyn's hand as though it were the only thing tethering him to the world. He didn't cry. Not then. Not until the children were asleep, the house quiet, the lamplight soft. Inside their bedroom, he finally broke. "I thought I'd have more time," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "I wanted to see them grow." "You will," she whispered, even though the words burned. "They'll carry you in everything they become." Jackson exhaled shakily. "And you?" he asked. "What will carry you?" Evelyn didn't know how to answer. She wasn't ready to picture a world without him, a world she had once survived alone, but now feared more than anything. The illness hollowed him quickly. Some mornings he was strong enough to sit on the porch and watch the children play. Other mornings he couldn't rise from bed without help. Evelyn stayed at his side through every cough, every shiver, every hour when the pain clawed through him so fiercely she wished she could take it into herself instead. She told him stories of their early days, of the auction, of the first time he said her name with something like wonder. He laughed sometimes. Other times he squeezed her hand and whispered apologies for leaving her to shoulder the world alone. But Evelyn wasn't alone, not anymore. Their children grew into their roles without being asked. Jonathan handled ranch duties with Jackson's quiet strength. Eleanor read medical books late into the night, determined to understand the disease consuming her father. Samuel tended the horses so his father could rest without worry. Rosalie wrote letters to distant doctors asking for remedies, while Theodore built contraptions to make Jackson's room warmer. Liam and Amelia curled beside him every evening, whispering stories and pressing kisses to his worn cheeks. The house was full of heartbreak, yes, but also love. Raw, immense, unrelenting. 6 months passed like a slow funeral. On the final night, Jackson asked for the lantern to be dimmed. The windows opened so he could hear the wind moving through the pines. Evelyn lay beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, their fingers interlaced. "Evelyn," he murmured, voice barely above breath. "I never believed in fate. But I believe in you. I believe in what we built." Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto his chest. He weakly brushed them away. "Promise me, you'll keep the ranch alive. Raise them the way we dreamed, strong, kind, free." She kissed his hand. "I promise." His eyes softened with a final warmth. "Thank you for saying yes to $1. His last breath left him like a prayer carried into the night. In the days that followed, grief swept through the house like a second winter. The children clung to her. The men lowered their hats. The valley fell quiet. At the funeral, Evelyn stood in black beside the grave, carved next to the plot that would one day be hers. Her voice did not break as she spoke. She told the crowd how Jackson Hale had been a hard man, but never a cruel one. How he rebuilt her life when the world tossed her aside. How he loved with a loyalty that could bend iron. How their children were his legacy and her salvation. When the service ended, she placed her hand on the cold headstone and whispered, "I'll carry the rest, my love. You've done enough." Life moved forward, as life insists on doing. Jonathan took over ranch operations. Eleanor pursued medicine. Samuel became a veterinarian. Theodore became an engineer. Rosalie wrote for newspapers and fought for women's rights. Liam managed the pastures. Amelia, always her father's shadow, blossomed into a fierce young woman with her mother's heart and her father's stubbornness. Evelyn watched them grow into everything she and Jackson had hoped for, and more. Each birthday, each wedding, each new grandchild felt like a thread, weaving Jackson back into the world. He was gone, but he wasn't lost. As old age settled into her bones, Evelyn found herself telling her great-grandchildren the story she had once been too afraid to speak aloud. The tale of a woman purchased for $1 and a man who believed she was worth far more. She spoke of love forged in fire, of battles fought for freedom, of wounds healed by time and tenderness. On the night of her 81st birthday, she slipped quietly into sleep, her breathing soft, her hands folded over the heart that had carried too much and given even more. When morning came, she was gone. Peaceful, serene, as if walking into the arms of someone she had waited decades to see again. They buried her beside Jackson, just as she had wished. The inscription on their shared stone read, "Two souls, one legacy, built in love, carried in strength." The story of Evelyn and Jackson Hale became legend in the valley. A reminder that no life is too broken to rebuild, no love too impossible to bloom, and no dollar too small to change everything. If you are hearing this now, take a breath and slow your heart. Let the story drift like soft wind across an open field. Evelyn's life, so full of storms and quiet miracles, teaches us that even the harshest winters eventually give way to spring. Her journey began in humiliation, in cold and fear. But she walked forward, step by trembling step, until she built a world held together by love. The kind of love that does not arrive loudly. It grows slowly, like dawn over snow. Jackson met her at her lowest and offered not rescue, but partnership. Hand to hand, soul to soul. And though loss came for them both, as it comes for us all, the legacy they built carried them beyond the limits of time. Their children, their land, their courage. These became seeds sown across generations. Tonight, let your heart rest, knowing that love like theirs never disappears. It lingers. It softens the edges of grief. It reminds us that even in the darkest places, something beautiful can still rise. And as the night settles around us, imagine Evelyn and Jackson walking together again, somewhere quiet, somewhere warm, where the storms finally fade. End of article. Good night.